All right. Hello. I'm back. I'm ready. This is all like casting stuff. So like I do really messy work here. So this is yesterday, which is kind of an amazing, I'll hold it to this camera. This is my face. So it's a bit dangerous because it's like you have to like try not to mess everything up. I was thinking about that, like how do you keep your equipment nice? You're not really supposed to have like a load of like outboard gear like next to like loads of silicon and stuff. And like I was casting my tits as well, and I was like sort of sat here in the middle of like the studio, and then I was like, and because we're in Sheffield, like the neighbours just like talk to you over the wall as well.
Yeah.
So they're like, "Oh, hey up, Doc," and you're like, you don't want to be the person with like covered in silicon, like topless, being like, "Hi mate, you all right?" So I just had to be like, I had to pull all the blinds down, and then I was like, what are we, I don't know, it's great making messy work, but also it's like, what do these equipments and things, it's kind of an interesting question about like what equipment can exist next to each other, and is there like there isn't a standard to which it should exist next to each other, but can, like, it's almost like pushing the limits of what you can have in one space, because I've got so much gear that's to do with like electronics, and then so much gear that's to do with like stuff that would really harm electronics all in one space. So I kind of need to I need to be a bit careful about that. And it gets really messy as well. It gets really dusty, and like ventilation, like if I'm working with stuff that's, what was I working with the other day? Like plastic dip, like, and stuff like that. Like if you're producing like some kind of like car wrap or plastic, or like stuff that's solvent, resin, then it's like, it's dangerous, isn't it? So it's like you can't be in a small space like with that. So it's like, how do you make sure these things can exist side by side? It's an interesting experiment in this way, because I'm trying to like do all these new things with my practice, but it was all having to happen in this shed. So less like with the neighbours and me, and like like you were saying, like your space, what can it be? Like you've got your bed, you've got your drum kit, you've got workstations. In a way, it's kind of like an experiment in itself, isn't it? Like this existence of stuff and work, like how it all works together.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's part and parcel, whatever the phrase is, for like interdisciplinary or intermediate work, where like I guess typically, like if it was just a music studio, you do have things like dust and liquid that you don't want to be like having your sandwich over top of your mics or stuff like that. But beyond that, there's nothing. I mean, here it is quite dusty because we're in the country, but like there's, I'm not going to be doing chemicals in here just because it's not part of what I do in here. Although like when I'm, I do have another space for like soldering or electronics and stuff like that. And I do a lot of 3D printing, but none of the filaments I work with are like the kind that have really shitty fumes. It has just a normal amount of fumes, but it could be in this space. It just is somewhere else in the house just for, logistic reasons.
Yeah. Just so you've got it. Yeah.
Have you done like analog photography stuff?
No, I haven't. I feel like at the moment I'm sort of struggling to bring up. Is it struggling? It's a bit of a critical mass where like all of these different elements I'm working with are yet to find a place together, and they're sort of flying around. And I'm really excited about creating this new live show, but what that is going to be is really like up for grabs. And I haven't, like, I'm aware that with things like experimenting with like analog photography, it will start to stretch me. We were talking about how you can like, I don't know, what was the word? It's a bit wild because you end up just being like so tentacly and like everywhere that you actually maybe don't get under the skin of one thing.
Yeah.
We did do an experiment with analog photography a long time ago when I was in a collective called Breathing Space Collective, and we were like a voice and objects and like site-specific installation and performance collective. And we did a piece where we took over did I tell you about this? We took over like a St. Augustine medieval tower for like, it was called St. Augustine's in Hackney, for 24 hours, and we did a 12-hour durational performance. And as part of that, we had people doing collodion photography. So these people called the E5 Process Collective. They were doing collodion-based photography development of our performance. So
what is that?
So collodion is silver and collodion collide to then create the image. So the idea is that it solidifies and works with silver to then. I wish I could tell you more about the science behind it. I can't. I know it's called collodion, and then it works with silver. So it's silver plate and collodion, and then placing collodion over the silver plate then creates the image. So it's like using old school plate photography.
Right, I see.
And they use that as well as analog photography processes, and it's really beautiful because the washing, the washing that they do with the liquid to what's the word? The development liquid, thank you. The development fluid is really beautiful because it's like this tilting process. So all these machines were tilting these photos of the performance, and they were kind of, because we were moving and it was slow exposure photography. It was like we just looked like ghosts, or that we weren't there, and it was really nice. So it was like this idea of time, and so that was the one time I've worked with analog photography. But I think it's amazing. But I just, at the moment, I'm like, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I need to like find out about before I move on to anything else. 6 weeks for a grain of gold, seeking the color that I own. Wrap me up before you die. Tell me where I eat, tell me where I lie. I think that there's something about, like, I started doing analog photography when I was at college, but because I have no grasp, like, I have a really bad grasp of things that need to go in order, and like how now I've worked out coping mechanisms to like make sure that I do stuff in the right order, or that I remember the right stuff in order and that it goes in the right order. I've sort of beat my brain into shape in that way. Like, I've made sure that I can do that. But when I was 16, 17, I simply couldn't get to grips with anything that was process-based, just because my brain doesn't work very well in that way. And I can't, I'm not brilliant at doing two things at once. So I had to I did it for, do you know A-levels? They have A-levels in the UK. Yeah, of course you do, because of your, sure. But yeah, so with A-levels, I took photography, and then I had to drop out because I was so rubbish at it. And they were like, why is everything black? Because I kept like exposing it early, and I just ended up with pages of black photography paper, and I was useless at it. So I just never did it in the end. And it's interesting. Like, as a kid, I don't think if you don't get exposed to technical stuff early, I think it's really hard to get to grips with later. But I have now got to grips with it. Like, I can work with more technical stuff, but it's taken me a while, What like connected that for you? Like, what was the... Yeah, what connected that for me? Having to just learn it off the bat. It's really interesting. In 2012, 2013, I started making experimental vocal music and realised that actually it was a really rich area that I wanted to work in. And I was like, before then I'd been in bands and I was a vocalist. And I think that it's really easy when I was growing up to be pigeonholed, I'm a woman. I wasn't from a background that was particularly like well versed in the arts. It wasn't like so it was like I just turned up and did singing, and I also was an MC. I don't know if you know, MC for garage and drum and bass raves and things like that, because it was my one way of creating stuff, because I didn't have a lot of aptitude to learn traditional instruments. So the technicality thing again like stopped me from learning a traditional instrument for a really long time, and I still don't play them because it's just beyond me to do more than one complex process in any performance. So that would be really difficult for me to do those two things at the same time. I've found ways around it. What made me do stuff differently was that I'd spent years and years and years just using my voice on stage, because it was the one way that I could sort of overcome these things. And also, we didn't have a music department at school because it got burnt down. It was that sort of school. It was the 90s. It was wild. I'm not going to go into it. But so I was like, I'm going to do this. And then I realized that actually doing extended vocal techniques was really exciting. And I realized that a lot of the bands that I was singing in, or the projects that I was doing in mainstream music, were really negative towards women as vocalists. I don't think it necessarily negates you if you can do other things than sing and write songs. But when you are a singer, I do still think there's something around that takes precedence over being a producer, for example, or a songwriter, and that publicly you're known as just a singer. You're just a singer. So I launched a solo career in 2017 because it was like a big screw you. It was like, no, like, stop this. I've been performing for like 15 years. I need to like somehow like take a bit of credit for it as well, I think, like really take ownership of it. And then I just was like, right, I'm going to start from scratch. So in somewhere before that, I'd started learning how to use DAWs and how to use various bits of music technology from 2012 onwards. So in the last sort of like 12, 13, 14 years, I've just taught myself back to front of like sounds, how to do basic sound engineering, how to use, production techniques and things like that. And I did go to college courses. I did a couple of college courses in that years and years ago to learn about sound recording techniques using, Logic and Ableton and things to the standard now. But that's why I did it. I had to, because I was just like, I need to keep creating, but I don't want to keep creating in a way that people will only ever recognize in a specific, very gendered way. Like, it is, vocals are really gendered weird, and they just still are. Like, I don't really understand. I think it's getting better. I think, but when you are a vocalist, that can be an issue. So so I started making all my own work from scratch, and now I need to undo that by becoming better at collaborating. Because now I like get obsessed with mixing and mastering everything I've done, like down to the wire, and I don't need to do all of that. Like I could hand it over, but I still get quite like about it because I feel like I still have a point to prove about it. But that's why I wanted to overcome all these kind of issues with processing, because it was actually an issue with the way that I was being perceived, I think. And I hadn't quite clocked how much of a learning difficulty I had and no one else had. And I use the word learning difficulty because I'm going off on one here, but bear with me. I'm interested in unpacking what neurodivergent and neurodivergence means at the moment. And I'm interested in all these kind of different, but I use the word learning difficulty because being neurodivergent is a really positive thing, and being in a neurodiverse society is healthy and a good component of what a society should be. But sometimes if you can't do stuff, it becomes a difficulty. It becomes something that the world doesn't want, like you can't do. So it's important, I think, at the moment for me to disentangle between being neurodivergent and having a learning difficulty. I think those two things are kind of important just to talk about because just because of their implications, but from my perspective, not perhaps from anyone else's.
Yeah. I mean, there's like a lot of that falls into like a blanket, generic, Western capitalist othering. Like where it's just like if it's not the normative thing, it's inferior, fucked, or some otherwise less worthy, both in terms of gender, in terms of class, in terms of cultural background, even in terms of like a big one for me is also like cultural cache of like the type of art one does. So like concert music versus a DIY gig versus like, all these things where like it's all art, but like we perceive them differently. And there's a thing that all of these share is like an otherment or an otherness relative to the, heteronormative, mammoth that we all, world and that we just kind of occupy. Like there's a really cool, I think it's Stephen Jay Gould quote of something about, I'll paraphrase it here, but it's something like, I'm less interested in the weight and size of Einstein's brain than I am of knowing that people of equal or greater intelligence have died in like cotton picking fields or something like that. It's like a real cool quote in terms of like the amount of cultural and human potential and value, words that are problematic here, is squandered by historic, and not even historic, like active systems of oppression, in a way that it just does art a disservice, does music a disservice, does every aspect of humanity a disservice. Is this oppression, and it's I think internalized in a lot of artists, and it's unfortunate in teaching in music, seeing gendered stuff manifest in a super concrete way. So, for example, female guitar players is like so rare, even though it sounds super banal, but it's like, it's such a kind of rare thing. Like where I teach, we had our first female guitar player like 5 years ago or something, which is outrageous that that's the case.
That is outrageous.
Yeah. And I think in the whole time we've had maybe 4 or 5 total. Like it's something that you wouldn't think, but it, like, if you draw those connections back, like you're a kid in grade school and you're like, oh, I want to do an instrument. It's like, oh, well, what should I play? It's like, you're going to play the flute or you're going to sing or whatever. And it's like, you're too young to question why that's the case. And unless you have a certain kind of disposition or personality, you're not really going to muscle through that because you don't know that that's an option to muscle through that. It's like, okay, yeah, I'll play the flute. That's okay.
Yeah, completely. You just end up and also the idea that one should be muscling through any given moment is quite mad, isn't it? When you think about, like, Jesus, like how many other things as a kid do you need to be dealing with at that point,
Yeah.
And it's quite a lot. And I remember back in the day, like going up to, I remember being at a drum and bass rave, and I was getting ready to go on stage, and this guy was like, "Do you know how to use a microphone?" It's amazing. Like, I look back on all these things and I think, wow, like, and just how dangerous stuff was. Like, it wasn't very safe back then at all. Like, a lot of raves were could be seen as much safer places than others, but others definitely did not feel safe, especially not for like very young women. Like, we were under 18, like we probably shouldn't have been there. Like, actually we definitely shouldn't have been there, but of course we were. And like, it wasn't a safe space. And like, now I look back on it and it was just so accepted that was, you're at this space. It's likely that you probably experience some form of intimidation or like sexual assault or whatever, like it's accepted. And it's like, well, it's not accepted. It's just, it felt accepted at the time. And you don't know, as anyone under the age of 18, I think that people forget how squishy people are when they're even like up to the age of 25. People are squishy, and like, they're not like, we're squishy emotionally, we're squishy when we question stuff. I don't feel like, and in a really good way, not in a bad squishy way.
For sure,
I think it's good. But I also think that like that malleability, that squishiness just leaves so much open for like just so much exploitation. And because we also have a massive front as well of like, we sort of feel like we know what we're doing, and we do to a lot of, like a lot of people do. And I'm envious of the people that really know what they're doing at the age of like 22. Because I still don't, but like, I'm sure, they're all wicked. But there is this moment of like, I hate the word suggestible because it sounds patronizing, but it's not. It's something about a sort of learn, which is really sad actually. I don't think that people should learn to be cynical or learn to have to push through stuff, but it's like, you don't know what shit you're going to have to put up with or what shit you shouldn't have to put up with yet. So therefore there was loads of shit that I shouldn't have had to put up with and like should have been railing against and like muscling against and going fuck off, like, but actually I didn't know what that was yet. And I think that's the thing, is that you don't know what it is yet, so you don't know what you don't know. Therefore, you're so open to exploitation because you're like, whereas now it's like, I don't want to sound cynical, but it's like, I went to see Laurie Anderson on Saturday night. Her new show is like incredible. It's called ARC, United States ARC. And she came up with the quote that she shared with Lou Reed about the 3 rules of life you should have when time feels like it's running out and it's going too fast. And one was get a really good bullshit detector and use it. And I think, I was like, it takes a long time to do that. It's hard. Like, I don't feel like I think that takes time. I think like, the saying art is long and life is short is true. And it's like, it's hard to develop all the things we need to push against these oppressions, because a lot of the time we're not really even sure how they manifest themselves. And there's this whole quote about, I remember reading at university about the hegemonic block that changes. It's this polymorphous shape that changes shape with the media and cultural spheres and their manifestations of power at the time. And the face that it shows to the world is always the most socially acceptable face. So in the 1960s and 70s, it was and when I say hegemonic block, I mean the hegemonic masculine block. Sorry, that's the name of it. And it was saying that the masculine patriarchal power is shown through this face that's acceptable. And in the 70s, this face was shown as the hippie progressive new man, you know, all of whom are now arch capitalists who founded some of the most problematic companies, you know, and have created a lot of geopolitical inequality. And now the acceptable face of this hegemonic bloc is sort of fragmented because of the ways that we consume media. And some people are absolutely, it sort of doesn't need to present a unifying face anymore. It sort of presents a face arguably that's really scattered and smashed to bits. You know, there's a lot of socially acceptable faces it can put on, but there are also a lot of spheres where it doesn't matter what it looks like because people, well, not that it doesn't matter, that no one cares because they aren't afraid to just say that they're being oppressive, you know, like the your body, my choice, Andrew Tate vibe. Like they don't care, they don't give a shit. They want to show that they are figures of oppression. They want to show that. So that's their, you know.
Yeah, with that stuff, it's like it's signifiers of oppression. So it's beyond just the like benefiting from and participating in system of like where it's just like, oh, life is easier and everything's great. Like now it's actually like it's like a signpost and a badge. Yeah. It's really crazy how all that is manifesting. I mean, manifesting visibly. It's been there. It's always been there. And but the how frontal it is and how much the signification of it is present as a badge of honor is the case, where like it's almost like edgelord irony, but without the irony. You know, it's like it's just embodied edgelord.
It's an interesting one because the reason I brought up the hegemonic masculine bloc was that I think it's called that. I wish I could remember the reference for it. Maybe I'll find it. So the reason I reference that is because these things are so hidden and they're based in someone being like all matey with you, you know, like a bloke might come up and be, all right, mate, you know, yeah, like, oh, let's be friends. And it's not being friends at all. And then you don't realise that until, you know, half an hour later or whatever, you know, or someone going, oh yeah, just come to the studio, do some vocals for me. And then you're like, wait a minute, I never got credited for that track. I'm sure that went somewhere. I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, wait a minute, I'm sure I did some recording of like a similar track. I was in the gym and I was listening to a house track and I was like, I recorded some stuff like this when I was about 17. I wonder where that went. But you know, under all of like this sort of masquerading of like matiness, like, yeah, you know, you're the same as me. We're equals. You come and do work with me. That's cool. And then it's not cool at all. But it was, like you say, framed under this acceptable face of like, you're an equal. You're my equal. Come on. Okay, let's go and make some music together. Or like, you know, you can do what I do. Except at the end of it, I clearly, you don't really think that. Or like you're occupying a space where you don't even realise that you don't think that, but you just act it. Because, well, you know, everything is based on actions, isn't it? Rather than words. And so, and now I would argue that all of that sort of full frontal, like, vomiting of like patriarchal stuff is because people just feel as though they've been given airtime. Like back in the, like, I don't know, like 10, 20 years ago, there just was not the airtime for people to be as outrageously prejudiced as they are now. Like as outrageous. Like there was not the airtime, you know, there was papers, there was the newspapers and the news and, you know, like that was it. We didn't have like thousands of avenues telling you that you're right and I support you as soon as you say something disgusting, you know, like that's what's done it, like social media. Like that's the bottom line, isn't it? So yeah, it's changed the shape of like the block or the like the portrayal of this patriarchal face that sort of changes shape all the time, but it changes shape as well to maintain the status quo. So it's almost like it's been allowed. It's like gone, oh, we've got license now just to like take the mask off. Let's take the mask off. Let's show everyone what we really look like. Yeah, you know? Yeah. It's like, yeah, here we go. Sorry, that's really dark.
No, I mean,
we went there. But yeah.
how fine-tuned would you say your bullshit meter is these days?
It's a good question. I said to my sister the other day that I haven't got a very good judge of character because I like everyone. I'm like, oh, they seem really nice. I'm like one of, like the grandparents that are like, they're nice, dear. I'm like that. They're nice. And they seem good. Yeah. So it's interesting. I think I've grown. No, I don't know. I don't know is the honest answer. I think I try to stay away from situations where I feel like I could that could happen. And like, so for example, I haven't made music like popular. And it sounds like really, I don't want to sound snitty because I like popular music and I like a lot of music. I have a real broad spectrum of influence and things I'm inspired by, but I don't really gravitate towards popular music, mainstream music spheres, like booking tours in like these sorts of venues or making music that has, I guess, traditional musical pop music references or kind of genre references, because I've faced so much bullshit. I feel a bit allergic to it. So I think rather than me having a brilliant bullshit meter, I'm more sort of like, I only sort of gravitate now towards places where I think, well, this looks like I'm going to be safe away from someone who's going to try and, take my work and sell it online and stuff like that without my say-so, which has happened a lot. Or like, hey, you get an email like 5 years later, can I have an 80-20 split on that? No, you can't. Like, no, you can't. Like, that's, so it's a good question, but I feel like it's more of for me, it's more of a structural thing than an interpersonal thing. For me, like, everyone starts with like an A+, unless I see them dropping rubbish, and then I just will bollock them on the spot. Or preferably when I'm riding my bike, because then I can get away quickly. If they're quite a scary looking, it might be a big man or something, and I'll be like, don't drop your litter, and then I'll cycle off really fast. But unless they're doing that or being, or being oppressive to someone or mean, then I think everyone's great. And then it's sort of, there might be alarm bells, but most of the time I am like the trusting grandparent. When I work with students, I'm like that as well. I'm like, oh dear, that's okay. And then one of the other tutors will be like, they were just lying to you. So I don't know, until proven otherwise, I would always think that everyone is great, but I tend to stay away from certain sectors at the moment because I know they've got more bullshit in them than others, even though sometimes that is a small margin,
Yeah. I mean, there's like a self-selection, like, I'm equally also very quite open and trusting, all that kind of stuff, even though like a lot of what I do, it tends to be very open and sharing. Like that's just like, I think that's an important thing, and that's a whole separate conversation. But that could be open to exploitation in a way that thankfully hasn't. But I think that's almost just like self-selection of the kind of worlds, and both artistic and musically, in which I operate is such a subset niche that kind of like filters out a lot of stuff in a way that I think is largely immune to that. Not largely immune, but like statistically, it's just a small set of people that it's unlikely that that's the case. So I've not really had to ever really be, as like an adult creative person, not had to really deal with so much of that. But again, like a similar thing where like I work in worlds where that's less the case or less likely to be the case. And I think those things are kind of related. Like I wouldn't say that doesn't have something to do with that. And I wouldn't say in my case that it has to do with like wanting to specifically avoid a kind of exploitation. It's more that the kinds of things I find important and the people who share thinking things like that are important are less likely to be into exploitation. That's not always the case, but like it's there's a closer to shared value system that is less susceptible to that, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say as a very broad rule, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree with that sentiment. Although we could get into that crazy Venn diagram of like progressive thinkers, and broadly nothing is as black and white as that. I wish it was, but yeah.
We just take turns like making ever broadening general statements. Like where we're just.
I know, yeah. That's a good game, isn't it? Like, how do you make? A dangerous one, but you can try.
We'll end up with TED Talks at the end of it if we keep going. Just.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Just banal so little truisms, where. Yeah.
Oh my God. So this piece Arc that I was talking about, Laurie Anderson's piece on Saturday, was based on the idea that she wants to create an opera where Ai Weiwei comes as God. He's like the Yahweh God of the Old Testament and is angry, but also not, because he's like Ai Weiwei. And he's played, and then Anoni is Buddha, and the world is ending because the eye cloud has broken. And the clouds, like it's all kind of threading together the idea of the cloud. The cloud is the nuclear cloud. The cloud is something that we can't see, the unsafety of our data, the sort of, what's the word? The insidious cloud. All of the insidious clouds have broken. Elon Musk is the devil. He is behind this, like the breaking of the cloud, and the idea that Earth must be like, that Mars is the literal next step for things to own and stuff like that, for us to go. And then the part of it that's sort of very, what was I going to say? The telling bit is really funny. There's the guy Ted behind TED Talks is the person that's going to build the ark that's going to get us all out. And in America, we don't know. What is it? The precedent is that in America, if you go back to the Old Testament and look at where the ark was originally built and where it's set off to, and you use like literal, what was it? They'd used actual coordinates. They found out that it was somewhere in the United States of America on the West Coast, and they're not entirely sure that the ark ever has actually taken off yet or done anything. So there's this idea that the ark is coming, and Ted from TED Talks, the guy that founded TED Talks, is going to make the whole ark out of mycelium. So this was just the beginning of a 3-hour performance, but it was like perfect. I was like, this is great. Count me in. No, don't count me out, but count me in for the story. It sounds great. It was amazing. It was like a wild ride. But yeah, like the idea that they all have the answer, and the answer is this massive ark made of mushrooms.
Man, there's something about like, I guess this nouveau capitalist oligarch where like there's like a profoundness that's expected or required or projected, as opposed to just being like I'm rich because I'm rich and I own a railroad, and that's just how it goes. Now it's like it needs to be this cosmic layer of bullshit with it. Like I was reminded, I was chatting with my partner about this is after Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson or whatever had all gone to like space. They were doing that shithead space race, and there was something where, reading a quote like William Shatner went with Bezos and came back, was like doing this whole profound like life, and he just shut him up.
The impression I had that I never expected to have is you're shooting up.
Oh my God!
Give me a champagne bottle. Come here. I want one. I want to hear this. Here. You want a little of this? Okay.
Basically, I guess Bezos' takeaway is like, we can fit so much trash in space. Like, that's fucking great. We can just dump all our shit in there. And I was just thinking of like the contrast between someone like Carl Sagan, like the pale blue dot, and like this profound, like this tiny dot, and like the universe. And it's like this whole, like, it's very like humanizing, and it's like so empathetic and cosmic in a very beautiful way, contrasted with a billionaire's version of it, which is like, I can just fucking put trash there. And it was just like this, like really as contrasted an experience. I forget what it's called, but like I guess astronauts, there's a term for, if you see Earth from like an overview, there's a term for what that feeling is, where like things like war and like all this stuff feels insignificant. But to go and experience that, but then come back with like the like the opposite of profundity. Like literally, like I can just put shit there, or we can just mine. It's like the most base, like sociopathic distance that, like, yeah, the contrast was very striking there. Yeah. So there's something about like this veneer of, yeah, cosmic, humanitarian, like it's just, yeah, I don't know. I don't know there's, because Nazis had that shit as well, like where, I mean, this is where, again, we're back into dark territory, but like I think something where, I don't think it was Goebbels, but one of them had them carry around the Bhagavad Gita.
Oh, yeah.
Like with them in terms of rationalizing horror through a kind of a spiritual lens. So like part of what they're doing is like not post-human, but like a supra-human experience where it's like this mystical thing of annihilation as part of like the ground truth of what they're doing. So it's like tying the most base thing to the most profound thing as a way of rationalizing what it means to like turn bodies into dust, you know, as opposed to just being grotesque. And yeah, this being like something that was from the higher ups important to manifest that, you know?
Interesting. And like, but it's almost like again, going back to the hegemonic patriarchal bloc, but also like the genocidal patriarchal bloc. It's like there's a what's the word, rampant bloodlust and like structural horror that's like imposed on people, like just horror, straight up horror is being, yeah, it's that what's the thing that we can use as an excuse to you know to do this. No one's actually just sort of turned around and gone, right, actually it's interesting, like as humans people find support on a more micro societal level to impose horrors onto people because of their gender, sexuality, etc., color of their skin, etc., but they don't. We kind of actually it doesn't matter whether it's thankfully or not. It's interesting that no one has just gone, actually, I just really want to start a war. I just want to kick the shit out of another country. Actually, maybe that was Putin. Maybe he just did that. He was like, oh, no, because he still had to lie about it to get people on side. No one has just done like a kind of ancient Roman, these people, I want to kill them all sort of thing. You know, no one's done that yet, which is just an observation. It's not like it doesn't have a value judgment attached to it.
Maybe that's not mimetic enough. Like that as a concept it can't get enough people on board to actually do, because like one person can't go off and kill everybody, you know, like that's, you know, so you kind of need to do it together. So you got to spin a web of, you know, some sort of mythology in varying scales of why those people need to be dead, you know.
Mythologies and stories. And I remember one of what was his name, Michael Gove, who UK politician, not a nice guy, clever guy, not a good guy, Tory party, on the back of his bookshelf he always had Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, always. That was his thing, you know, like that was like Atlas Shrugged was like big Tory party dialogue, like, you know, kind of rampant free market. It's just really interesting. Like you say, everyone kind of has to have this narrative. Like we tie ourselves to narratives, and stories are how we understand the world. And no one has quite sort of. It's an interesting one. Like, no one wants to maybe talk about the fact that there might be an innate thing in humans that just creates horror. maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm overstating that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people think that. I guess, a little bit more optimistic in that I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of humans are vulnerable in that gushy way that you were mentioning before. So that itself is susceptible to one person wanting to do that, and then that kind of overrides more. You know, like I think the power of hate and oppression is more powerful than mushy pacifism, in a way that like fewer voices doing that has a bigger impact than the inverse. You know, that's how I would personally like rationalize the state of things, as opposed to being like it's human nature that we want to kill each other or whatever.
but it's sad. But maybe like aggression and oppression are quicker to gather ground than pacifist perspectives. I'm not sure. I wish that wasn't the case. I don't know if I agree with that, but I'm not sure. I need to go away and think about that.
So yeah, what's the mold stuff you're making now, like the casts that you just did?
Yeah, good. Let's talk about materials. They're better. They've got their own power structures. They don't fucking they do kill each other, but in more like I feel like a more even-handed way. So I'm looking at the idea of thingness. So the Jane Bennett school of thought, and what's the word? Feminist materialities, queer materialities. The idea that things have thingness, they have their own power, and they have their own. Bruno Latour talks about actants, so things that have the power to change the course of other things. So anything that has the power to change the course of other things is an actant, and that doesn't matter if you're like a human or whatever else, a non-human or more than human. You can have the power to change other things, and that means that you've got a power of thingness. So Jane Bennett calls it a power of thingness, or vital materiality. And I'm kind of interested in like this just ongoing entangled weird relationship between you trying to marshal something that could be a deeply technical material or a material that just is. Like some materials just melt and then you can change them into something else, but actually the journey stops there until you put them in an assemblage with something else, and then it's completely unexpected. And so the kind of that sort of journey is, on one respect, is just about me sort of mashing and squishing and not knowing these materials, but getting to know them to a point on one level, which is a really sort of physical, haptic thing where I have to put my hands on it and I have to get my hands and use things like... Actually, originally I started using things like ice and thermoplastic because they shapeshift and they're also cyclical. So you can melt ice and thermoplastic for as many times as you like, and it's got a limitless sort of life. And it's most types of PCL are biosafe or better biosafe than a lot of other plastics. So they can be used in terms of body implants and skin implants and medical uses, and so I use them for those specific reasons because I was interested in those properties. Now I've started thinking, well, actually, what things can contain other things, and can those containers change the meltiness or the thingness of the other things? So I've started to use things like latex and silicone molds, and I did some great sessions with a wonderful sculptor called Anthony Bennett, who is the sort of sculptor that can make literally anything. And so he's just amazing. His work at scale is incredible. And so he was a great person to work with because he's helped me design wearable collars for instruments before, for the previous instrument I made, which was a wearable vocal processing unit. So he designed a collar with me.
A wearable sound material sculpture and instrument is being made for the project using reusable thermoplastic, silicon and breakthrough electromyography sensors that process live muscle flex data into a wearable granular synth and vocal pedal that augments and splinters and loops my vocals depending on the duration and number of muscle flexes it detects. It has been created in collaboration with artists and researchers Courtney Reed and Robin Foster and sculptor Anthony Bennett.
And then he said, actually, I think that what would really lend itself to your practice is stuff like microcrystalline wax, which is also known as two swords wax. And that's got like a really low melting point at around 60 degrees, but it's really hard, and it's also quite dangerous. It's like really hot, and I quite like that there needs to be a mutual respect about the danger of something that it's like it takes us back to that photographic process. Like you need to respect a process of something, and how long does that take you to do that? And so I'm interested in these sorts of, and silicon can be quite, it can just be really, really annoying if it's not used properly. And there's also a really interesting time-bound process in all of these things because they harden really quickly. So what are we doing with them? Like, how do they interact with different temperatures? They harden really fast, and that affords you less time. And then it shows, and your physicality is changed because you're trying to do something with this object that might change really quickly. Like alginate just goes off in 2 minutes. And I was trying to cast like my leg the same day as I was busy like trying to do my face and my boobs, and I was like rolling around in a puddle of alginate, like trying to put it all over my leg. And then I put too much water in it, and it was gone. It was like a pile of jelly. I was like, oh, it's over. And I hadn't even mixed it. Like I was like, oh, I've just wasted like £5 worth of alginate. And it was like, yeah, it's amazing. It just goes. And like plaster, it's like, plaster is incredible. It's the most ancient material, and it just goes, it's like, it's this beautiful, and it creates heat, and it can also be very dangerous, but it's also really beautiful. So yeah, I'm interested in that, in the not knowing. And I spoke to, there's an artist called Florence Peake, who's a phenomenal artist, and she's been a mentor of mine for a few years. And I'm always in awe of her work with materials, and she's creating a new piece of work about plaster and physicality and what happens when you cast in real time. And we spoke about this exploration of how you might find stuff out on stage. So I'm kind of interested in the finding stuff out on stage. Like, so when I'm experimenting with stuff in my little shed workshop and creating loads of mess, I'm thinking, well, if I get to a point where I know exactly how it works in large scale, there's quite a lot of joy that you might forfeit in a live situation when you know everything. So maybe I don't want to know everything, much like you go on stage and you improvising with materials. Maybe you necessarily need to not know what's going to happen when you cover a floor in latex, wait for 48 hours and then see what happens when you try and peel it off with stuff underneath it. Or I don't know, but like I'm sort of, all these things I don't know. And like, so I'm kind of booking residencies to work out, is it, how far do I want to not know stuff? And how far can I leave it, like the not knowing? And because equally, like as with improvisation, with improvised music, or any sort of performance, you want to have value to the audience. I do anyway. I want there to be, and I think some improvisation can just be gorgeous. It can just be like indulgent exploration, and you don't really care, and or I don't really care. But actually, I've been really thinking about, what it is that comes away from something. What are the messages? How are you finding your way through this act of performance? And what are other people finding with you? So my work is based on finding your way as so the idea of live dreaming is that the dream is the ultimate wayfinding device. That is in our psyche. It's part of us. We what was his name? James Hillman. It's like, he calls it the death of the ego. So when you go to sleep, you are given all this stuff by your dreaming brain, and it's not for you to decide what that is. It's not for you to disentangle any of that, right? You don't have power over those messages. So the death of the ego, it's like sort of, it goes into the underworld, but it's also like, it's a knowledge repository, and it's a wayfinding device. It's your brain's way of finding your way. It's not for you, and it's for you to try to find your way with, but it's not for you to ever know. And like, I'm interested in performance being that sort of space of, you're trying to find your way through this act of creating music or dance or all of these disciplines, but it's not for you to then know what that is, actually. It's almost like when you dream, I believe that performance is a type of dreaming. It's a type of live dreaming. So when you're doing that performance, it's the death of the ego is to submit that to the audience. They are the underworld, right? They're James Hillman's underworld. They're going to tell you or not tell you or give you things that it's not for you to interpret. It's just, that's what you will get. And that's what you're doing for them. You are giving them something. and it is for them. They can interpret that, it's fine. But whether or not they decide to, it's up to them again as well. But I'm sure you've had moments where you've like had probably people come up to you after shows and they've said something and it's been like totally not what you intended. You know, have you ever had those moments?
Yeah. I mean, just as like mining in this subconscious or occupying some of that space is an unknown to you, and it's part of what's interesting and useful about it is that you don't know, and you engage with that. That your version of what the dream is isn't necessarily transferable to another person. However, the product, conceptual, physical, or otherwise, it itself can then also be that dream to some other person to perceive, or like meanings are mapped whether or not they're the meanings that you intend, and then the way when that transfer to someone else, it's a like a amorphous blob of aesthetic unit that then can be, you know, gobbled up by someone. Not gobbled, that's a bad term here, but like as in the meaning is mapped onto them in a way that has not necessarily nothing to do with you, but what you made of it is not necessarily what they make of it, and that's neither here. I don't know how much that's important to you, whether like what you experience is communicated, but like I could see the meaning being an abstracted thing for them as well. You know, just like as humans, we're meaning-making machines. You know, so there's things that we process anyways. I guess one thing that I was kind of wondering, particularly with you saying some of this stuff now, is when you're dealing with things that have to do with sculptural components or basically pre-performance aspects that then are used in performance, but some of them are temporal in how they move and diffuse and materials change. Like how much of that is solely contained to what you would consider a performance with a beginning and end? So for example, you making a mold yesterday, how much of is that process also performance? For you perhaps, but perhaps for someone like where does the container of aesthetics for this specific work or work like it, when you're working with materials that require some pre-production or whatever, but have some transmutability, like where does it begin and end, and does that matter?
Yeah, I think it does matter, and I think it's important that it's not. Sorry, I just bashed my microphone then. I'm going to start that again for the edit. I think it does matter, but I don't think that delineating it is important for this work. I think it's important not to delineate that for this work and to question it. And so, but I do that in different ways. And I think that some performances I've come up with have been hyper stylized as like, this is definitely a performance right now. This is how it's going to go. And I think the more ambitious you are with materials and performance, there's no way that you can get over that unless you go really fluxus about it and just start smashing up your front room. At any given moment, I don't feel like you can. Even then, you will have planned to do so, and someone will have given you a score. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like the more ambitious you get about delineating this stuff, the more then it sort of plays into itself. So, and when I've decided to do stuff with materials and go, right, I'm going to really show the making of this, it just requires so much more production because it's a high wire act, right? So then you have yourself, the producer, the producers, the venue. Suddenly all the stakeholders get involved because they have to, because of, it might hurt someone or it might, create a risk or from that logistic level. But I think for this work, when on a practical level, to answer that question, when I'm working with materials and I'm thinking about, okay, this is really beautiful, I get obsessed and with the way things look while I'm making them. So every single inch of what I make gets filmed, and then those films often find themselves into the visuals that I create alongside the performances. So there'll be projections and they'll be part of the artwork for stuff. The artwork, actually, the making of the stuff that's the art that becomes the artwork for my releases or for my stage work is often always more about the stuff that happens while I'm making it. It's more about the beautiful angle that happens when, I don't know, there's sunlight and it's melting or something than it is when it's finished. It's so much more about the filmed presence of it. So yeah, it is about questioning that line. But the more I try to be ambitious about the stuff that I use in my works, the more that line becomes more difficult, perhaps more solid, because more people have to get involved to implement it. You know, like I played Supernormal. It was such a pleasure this summer. Like I love it. That's so, you know, it's like everyone's dream festival to go play at, and we love it, and it's great. And they're so wonderful. But they were like, right, you're going to bring a freezer on site. And we were like, yep, we're bringing a freezer on site. So we brought our freezer with us. We bought a big old freezer. We put it in the car. And because we were trying to create these relationships with these unpredictable materials and like show the making of it and show the struggle or the relationship or this like what's the word? The alchemical queer quality of what we're trying to do with this material, that suddenly we had to create a little lean-to for the freezer. We had to put a sign on it. We had to do a risk assessment. We had, you know, and that's not the festival's fault. That's just because we, you know, all these things come with the things because we're human. And it's an interesting observation about the logistics of ambition. You know, like you want to do something that's more down to the wire or with materials, and you end up just having to faff about with gaffer tape, you know, for an extra half an hour because of what you want to do. So I don't know. Yeah, I it's a really interesting question. Yes, I do think every time I'm making any sort of form of this work, the documentation of the process is going to find its way into the final element and will question whatever it is that I come up with. And I think the past lives or the previous lives of the parallel life of the material as it changes is always evident in the performance. So it sort of exists in one state live and it exists in another state in a video or an object on the floor or something, or a gesture, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I ask is because, like, similar to you, where there's a lot of media generated from part of a process, like my view on that over the years has changed now, where I have a very diffuse view of what the art object is, and I don't mean like the physical object, as in like what the gesture of creation is, to the point where, like, for me it's like this big nebulous thing where documentation and or conversations or related media are just part of the singular thing. And because a lot of what I do happens to be performance, or there's a video where there's a beginning and end, there is a time-bound component often. But I don't necessarily view that as a kind of button-ended thing, you know, like where that's just one aspect of this whole thing flowing. And not necessarily flowing as in a directionality, but as in the whole thing exists as all of it, as the conversation, as the picture, as the image, as the sound, as the thing, without clear beginning or end. Digital stuff is very malleable because we don't even have a really good way to store digital things. Like hard drives go bad, CD drives go, like there's no permanent way to store digital information. But we don't really have that for paper, like books either. Like people burn libraries and stuff. Like there's no, all information is ephemeral, you know, and that's like okay, you know. So like having a type of document that's gonna dissolve over time is fine, you know.
Yes, and I guess one of the beauties, we were talking about the beauty of the material is it's completely, what's the word? Social meanings in the materials that they're placed upon do not have the same timeline. And it's like and they don't have the same travel. And like when yeah, like the stuff that survives. I mean, I'm a massive geek. Like I like, when, did you ever used to watch like Time Team or like, Time Team was like an archaeological program, and they'd do like big archaeological digs across the UK. And there's a new one called Digging for Britain. And I love the improbability of the stuff that just turns up, and like how that turned up. And you're like, this is wild. Like someone's hairpin, like is way more like likely to turn up in future and tell us about, I don't know, someone in a sauna than someone's like massive, like a huge piece of work, or like the whole of their life's research on like the future of religion or whatever. So all these grand ideas, all these things that we have, and all these kind of great big theories and narratives and worldviews and all of this can just be reduced down into something that you like keep your fringe out of your eyes with, like there's just nothing you can, like you just don't know. And I love that. I just think it's wonderful. But then also like the religion and worldview that we don't want to show everyone is often the thing that we'll probably end up showing them. Like we will end up with a huge layer of plastic across that will be the plasticine. That's what we'll get called, or something like that. They'll call us that, and like there will be meters of plastic to dig through, and like we probably don't want that to be the thing that we're remembered by. But unfortunately, that's how it is. We can't control. Materials have the last say, don't they? In what they're going to do with our memories and our like narratives about the world, which I think is magic. That's why I kind of love watching dig programs in that way. You just don't know. Like, it's great. Someone said it really beautifully. I was watching a film about the first person who happened to be a woman. What's her name? Oh no, Lynn, who traversed the nose, which is, El Capitan, the highest like free climbing point you can ever do. I mean, I have to say, I don't really I'm not a big climbing fan. I was watching. I go climbing, but it's like I went to go and watch a film about it, and actually an unexpected thing was that I got to see this wonderful woman, Lynn, who'd done the highest, biggest, most completely batshit crazy free climb of El Capitan. Like incredible just watching her up there. Like it's just like sheer endurance. And she was like, well, I felt that I was just completely disbelieved and discounted. And it's like I didn't count because I was a woman. She said, so for me, the act of doing is, she said, it's like performance art, but actually what she kind of did. And she said, I wanted to do what they do when they do performance art, which is like the incontrovertible doing of the thing. So people just watch the thing and then they shut the hell up, or they because they see you do the hardest possible thing you could possibly ever do, and you just do it. And I was like, oh, you're just such a beautiful human. Like, it's so beautiful. And just watching her like just do it, it's fucking amazing. In the 70s, with just like minimal equipment, just like up a mountain face, like it's incredible. But and just thinking about that, I was like, right, how can I, because I had an interview with a panel to talk about progression at the end of a first year of doing the PhD. I'm currently doing a PhD, practice-based one, at BCU, and they were saying, how are you going to document your work in a way that is going to show us this like process, this outcome, this like unknowable, this tactile, this haptic, this squishy knowledge? And I thought to myself, there's something really wrong with that. And I fell down a bit of a rabbit hole when I answered them. I said, I feel like at the moment I'm overstretched because I'm trying to be a film editor, a producer, a creator, a sculptor. And I don't feel like I'm doing all of those. And it's, I feel like I'm doing too much and I want to really refine what I'm doing. And I don't know at the moment. I'm going to try, but I don't know. And actually what got me was, surely the outcome of this is performance. And it's good if you can see the footage at the end of it, but surely the point of it is that in the moment of performance, that's when it's born, and that's when we're sort of doing our wayfinding, you know. And then you can watch it back, and then the whole point is that you interpret it, but we know that that's also a wayfinding exercise, and that none of this is perfect. So, you know, like, and maybe that should have been my answer, is more like your answer, which is, it's the medium is the message. You know, it's the thing, right? It's, who said that? Can't remember his name. Yeah, exactly. That's the one. That's the badger. And like, so, you know, the medium is the message. And so I'm just going to do it. And if you're there, you're there. But if you're not there, you're going to see a video afterwards, and the video might contain some of the things that happened, but actually it's going to be a video. And the thing that was thinged was the thing, you know, like there's no other, you know, like, because that's the whole point in art. Like, I think of the physicality of any sort of multidisciplinary or performance art is that, anyway. That was a very long walk down a windy beach just to make a short point. I'm sorry about that.
If you'd like to support the making of these videos, please join our Patreon. The link is in the description below. Thanks for watching.